Linear motion 2016, question 1b. A particle is projected vertically upwards with a velocity u. After an interval of 2t seconds, this is 2t seconds later, a second particle projected vertically upwards from the same point with the same initial velocity, and they meet at a height h. Show that h is equal to u squared minus gt squared over 2g. Okay, so we're going to need their distances to be the same here. So S1 and S2. So S is equal to ut plus a half at squared. So let's look at particle A. Call this S1. It's going to be equal to ut. Well, we'll call this one, because this is 2t seconds later, it's not the same t, so let's call that t1. ut1, and A is minus g, so minus g over 2t squared. So we can't do anything else with that. That's t1 squared, gt1 squared. For particle B, we're going to have the distance 2 is going to be u times t. This is the only thing that's going to change in these. So if the first one is t1, 2t seconds later is t1 take away 2t. That's ut minus g over 2 times t squared. So t1 minus 2t to be squared. We can see in the answer here we don't have a t1. So we're going to need to simplify in terms of t1. So this is going to be ut1 minus 2ut minus g over 2 times t1 squared minus t1 by 2t twice, so minus 4 t1t, and then plus 4t squared, 2t to be squared. Tidying this up, we're going to get ut1 minus 2ut minus gt1 squared over 2 plus, well, the 2 and the 4 will divide, so we're going to get plus 2gt1t, 2gt1t, and again the 2 and the 4 will divide, and we're going to get a minus 4gt squared over 2 minus 2gt squared. So S1 and S2 have to be equal, so let me bring S1 down so I don't have to write that big equation out again. ut1 minus gt1 squared over 2 has to be equal to the right. Straight away we can see we have a ut1. We also have a gt1 squared over 2. Three remaining terms all have a 2 in them. I won't cancel them too quick. They also have a t in them. So let me bring the 2. We want t1 on its own here. Let me bring the other 2 to the left. 2ut plus 2gt squared is equal to 2g t1t. So I can definitely cancel my 2's and my t's. And I'm left with u plus gt is equal to gt1. So now I have time 1. t1 is equal to u plus gt over g. So that should help me now. If I fill this into my equation for S1, I should be able to simplify down to get the distance here, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to not have a t1 in the answer. So I have t1 here in terms of t, and now I can sub it in here. And hopefully that will give me what they were looking for, this guy here. So we have S1 is equal to u times u plus gt over g. Actually, I'm going to need more room than that. I'll come down and do it here. S1 is equal to u times u plus gt over g. That's ut minus g over 2 by t1 squared, which is u plus gt over g to be squared. Seems a bit long-winded, but let's see. So we're going to get u squared plus ugt over g minus g over 2 times u squared, the top line squared on its own, u squared plus ugt twice plus twice ugt plus g squared t squared. And that will all be over g squared. Okay, let's see where we go from here. We're in terms of g and t, so the squared here will cancel with this g. So that's going to leave, I'm going to bring the g, I'm going to simplify this fraction in simple form. U squared over g plus, because the g will divide in, these two g's will cancel it. So it's going to be plus ugt over g, so plus ut. And this is minus 1 over 2. So this becomes a 1. And we've got u squared over g. I'll separate them all. We've got u squared over g, but it's half of that. So minus a half, or just minus u squared over 2g. I'll leave the 1 in, minus a half u squared over g. Then we have, well, the 2 will cancel, this 2 and this 2 will cancel. So it's just going to be minus 1 times ugt over g minus ugt over g minus ut. So this g, and again this one will cancel. We're just left with the u and the t. And then we have minus a half times gt squared over g. So that's going to be minus gt squared. The g and the squared part will cancel, so minus gt squared, and that will be over 2. So do we have commonality here? We have u squared over g, and we have a half u squared over g, so that's just going to leave a half of them. The uts will cancel, so we're going to be left with u squared over 2g, or a half u squared over g, minus gt squared over 2. So we just look back over what they were looking for. The denominator was 2g, so let's make both the denominators 2g. So we're going to have u squared over 2g minus gt squared. Now it's currently over 2, so if I add a g onto the bottom, I would have to add another g onto the top, which would make that a squared. So that's going to give me u squared minus g squared t squared over 2g, and hopefully this is what they were looking for. U squared minus gt squared. Actually, no, I wrote the question down wrong technically. It is g squared t squared over 2g. So that's a long simplification to get to the answer.